Well, the next group of organisms we are looking at in the diversity of life are the fungi. Fungi can be multicellular, most of them are, or unicellular, like yeasts. Fungi are heterotrophs, meaning that they do not make their own food. They eat. What do they eat? A lot of them eat dead things. They clean up dead organic matter. They're often called saprophytes or saprobes, meaning that they eat dead organic matter. Fungi are very good at breaking down cellulose and other hard to break down things. They often break down wood and leaves. Bacteria are more decomposers of animals, and the fungi are the main decomposers of plant material. Most fungi have specialized root-like thingies, not real roots like plants do, called hyphae. Hypha, singular, hyphae, plural. If you get a bunch of hyphae together in a network of threads, it's called the mycelium. Fungi reproduce from spores. And if you remember what a spore is a 1N or a haploid thing. It has one set of chromosomes that turns into a 1N multicellular, or in the case of yeast, unicellular organism. But then at some point, you have the junction of two haploid chromosomes to make a diploid organism. We'll see how that happens in fungi. Where do fungi live? They live all over the place. How do they live? They can be parasitic, like rust fungi on plants. They can even be predators, not in the sense of an animal predator, but they will ensnare nematodes, and through junctions with the nematode called haustoria, they will eventually, this thing will die and it will eat the nematode. And most fungi are saprobes or saprophytes, right? Decomposers. What's neat about fungi is when they eat, they don't digest things inside of their bodies, but secrete enzymes called exoenzymes to digest the things that they want to digest outside of their bodies. They break down stuff around them with these enzymes and then absorb the materials from the digestion. So again, they're eukaryotes and they're heterotrophic, but digest their food externally. Sometimes fungi can attract animals to disperse their spores by smelling. In the case of stinkhorn fungi, they attract flies. The flies take off with the spores. So remember, hypha, singular, hyphae, a group of root-like threads that comprise a network called mycelium. And if you've ever been out in the forest and turned over a leaf or two on the forest floor, you've probably seen this. Or any place where you have damp, dark conditions, you might find these mycelial networks. So they grow in and around their food, and the hyphae can produce spores. They're called kinetospores. But you can also have other spore producing bodies in fungi called fruiting bodies. And the mushrooms behind me are fruiting bodies that produce spores of mushrooms. Fungi cannot move around, but they can grow quickly and envelop their food, digest the food around them, and then suck it into their little bodies. Fungi have 3 different life cycle phases. You have the spore that germinates to form haploid hyphae, the threads. In some mushrooms, you have what's called the dikaryotic phase, where you have a cell with 2 nuclei from 2 different fungi that have merged, but the nuclei remain distinct, separate from each other. They don't fuse right away. So they get 2 haploid nuclei, one from male, one from female, if you want to call it that. And the mycelium of this dikaryotic phase produces a fruiting body, the mushroom. And then the nuclei fuse together, creating the diploid condition. 2N, 2 sets of chromosomes, one from each parent. Then the third phase is meiosis, where the diploid goes back to the haploid with the production of spores through meiosis. Meiosis means you go from 2N to 1N. So you can look at these 3 stages: the haploid stage, where you have these spores that come from the hypha. And then in the soil, you'll get fusion and create this dikaryotic phase where you have 2 nuclei in 1 cell. This produces a fruiting body we call mushroom. People call them toadstool. Toadstool typically is a poisonous mushroom. And then you have these diploid spores undergo meiosis and diploid individuals, diploid condition that undergoes meiosis to produce the haploid spores, completing the life cycle. So if you look on the gills of a mushroom underneath it, these will produce club-shaped basidiospores. It's a type of fungus that produces club-shaped spores, typically with a fruiting body like a mushroom, but not always. And if you remove the stipe or the stalk of the mushroom and put a maturing fruiting body upside down on a piece of paper, you'll see after a while you get a spore print. Spores that come out from in between these gills. So what are the major types of fungi? The club-shaped spore fungi called Basidiomycota. These include our mushrooms, but also shelf fungi. These are fungi that grow out of trees, like a shelf, but also some smuts and rusts that produce these club-shaped fruity bodies. Club-like spores. Then you have the ascomycetes, which produce spores in little sacs called an ascus. These include yeasts, which are unicellular fungi, truffles, which are a delicacy, morels, which are a very good edible mushroom, choice edible, but also some crop diseases. And then you have the zygomycota. These are often called conjugated fungi because they reproduce sexually through conjugation. But most of them are molds, things that you get on your bathroom shower curtain or on rotten fruit. Then you have the chytrids. The chytrids are interesting in that they're mostly aquatic, and some of them are parasitic, including the chytrid fungi that have decimated some populations of frogs and toads, and even can impact reptiles like snakes. What about lichens? Lichens is not one type of organism. Well, it's a type of living thing that is really two organisms working together. It's either an algae or a blue-green algae, i.e. a cyanobacteria, working together with a fungal hyphae. The fungus gets food from these autotrophs and in exchange gets a nice substrate with an alga cell in this case to hang out. And you've probably seen lichens all over the place. They come in different types. They come in crustose forms, forming a crust. Foliose forms like leaves. And this spiky type thing too. Lichens are tough. They grow on rocks, on bark, and even in the tundra. They're often food for reindeer, caribou. Fungi are problematic too in that they can be parasitic and cause disease, harm plants like Dutch elm disease caused by a fungus that kill a lot of American elms. They can blemish our corn with corn smut. Corn smut is actually edible. It doesn't look that good, but it's edible. And if you've ever been in a locker room, moist, damp conditions, good place for fungi, parasitic fungi that can cause athlete's foot, ringworm, and other types of fungal infections. The chestnut blight is a well-known fungus because it essentially removed the American chestnut from the canopy of eastern deciduous forests. It was brought in on Chinese chestnut trees from China, hence the name Chinese chestnut. And the American chestnut was defenseless against this fungus that essentially invaded the phloem and xylem of the plant and killed the top of the plant. Aspergillus is a fungus that looks pretty nice, but it can reproduce in the respiratory tracts of animals like birds and kill them. Strawberries don't last forever. They often succumb to a type of fungus called botrytis. We like fungi though because they decompose things, recycle nutrients, really important. And they can be food. We eat mushrooms. We use yeast to make wine and to get bread to rise. And they can also ripen certain cheeses, like blue cheese. And fungi are a major source of antibiotics, like the mold penicillium that produces, you got it, penicillin. Don't eat every mushroom you come in contact with, because some of them can kill you, like the Amanita or destroying angel. Shut your liver down. There's our antibiotics working against a staph infection, Staphylococcus aureus. Penicillin was just the first of many of these different antibiotics. And they have mycorrhizal fungi, which are extremely important for trees and other plants. The fungus invades roots of plants, which sounds bad. It's actually pretty good because it's a mutualistic relationship. The tree gets essentially an enlarged root network for more water and nutrients. And the fungi gets a source of carbohydrates. Myco, fungus, rhizae, root. And just to add some interesting mushrooms that are around, ones that are, there are all kinds of colors, like the psilocybins behind me, or the fawn mushroom with golden color, the deadly amanitas, which come in different forms, but all have this veil and a bulbous subterranean thing called the vulva. Chestnut boletes have pores, not gills. There's a morel mushroom, choice edible in the spring, usually found in apple orchards or under tulip trees. Old man of the woods looks really nasty. It's actually an edible. Shaggy manes often grow in lawns. They have a very long cap that eventually opens up and sheds spores. Another choice edible, chicken of the woods, grows out of wood. It tastes like chicken, I guess. Gem-studded puffballs, which are also edible. These are not edible, and they can be confused sometimes because they can look kind of like yellowish orange, but they also look like chanterelles, which is another edible. But they grow out of wood, and they're bright orange like a jack-o'-lantern pumpkin. Urn-shaped fungi. There's a shelf fungus. Grows out of trees on like a shelf. A sulfur shelf, which is another name for chicken of the woods. And even fungi that look like coral. Rushlets, concave caps. Turkey tails. They look like the tails of a turkey, typically growing out of decaying wood. And even gooey stuff like witch's butter. So, fungus mungus. Pretty neat stuff.